It is live now. You can start.
Are you able to hear and see me, Anish?
Yes, sir, you are loud and clear.
Okay.
So shall we start?
Yes, I'm ready, Anish, whenever you are.
Yeah. So very good morning, good afternoon. Yes, sir. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
Go ahead, Anish. It is clear.
Yeah. Sorry for this technical glitch, and very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the keynote speakers and the panelists for this session on blue economy and sustainable development. And in this session, we have four keynote talk by Dr. Shelly, Director of National Institute of Advanced Studies and Distinguished Scientist MOES, Dr. Commander Arnab Das, Emeritus Resource Faculty at the School of Integrated Coastal and Maritime Security Studies, Sheena Talma, Marine Scientist from Seychelles, who is a member of the Nekton core group, and Professor Ken Finley, Research Chair of Ocean Economy at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. In this session, we also will be having a panel discussion. And this session was supposed to be moderated by Dr. Ben Milligan, but we couldn't get him online due to some reason. So may I request Dr. Srinivas Kumar, Director IIOSC, to moderate and take over the session.
Thank you very much, Anish. So I'll try to backfill for Dr. Ben Milligan, but if he is able to join in the course of this session, please let me know. Invite him and then please let me know actually, so that we could then from there on, whenever he joins, we can co-moderate it. But I'll try to fill in for him. So welcome to all the distinguished speakers in this particular session on blue economy and sustainable development. We've heard, earlier today, even in the inaugural session, the importance of blue economy, and then while actually trying to harness the resources that we have from the oceans, the importance and the need to actually do it in a sustainable manner. And then how ocean science, has a very important role to actually make in science-based kind of planning and policy when we actually talk about blue economy and sustainable development. With this, we will actually hear from the four distinguished speakers. We have about 20 minutes each for the presentations. And then followed by the presentations, we'll try to actually have some focused discussions on the blue economy and sustainable development. We'll have about 30 minutes. And then we'll also try to take questions from the floor if we have any. In actually having the discussions, I'd like to say that we will be actually addressing 2 focus questions after the talks are over. So you could actually then try to think about what we are going to talk about. One is actually how to optimize the role of oceans in sustainably feeding the world's population. And then what are the probable sources of equitable and sustainable development of the ocean economy. So these are, we could actually, have our discussions around these kind of questions, and then anything that comes out from the floor, and of course also based on the, presentations from the distinguished panelists. Let me actually start by inviting the first, distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Shailesh Naik. Several of us know Dr. Shailesh Naik very closely. He is currently the director of the National Institute of Advanced Studies. He was the secretary to the Government of India for the Ministry of Earth Sciences. In fact, he was also the former director of INCOIS, the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services. He led programs related to the science of climate change, weather services, polar science, geoscience, ocean science, modeling, ocean survey, resources and technology. Dr. Naik is a PhD in geology. He worked for very long years in the Space Applications Center of the Indian Space Research Organization. Dr. Naik is a fellow of the Indian Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Sciences, the Indian International Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, and academician of the International Academy of Astronautics, Paris. He is a recipient of several awards, including the IGU Harnarayan Lifetime Achievement Award in Geosciences in 2013. He's also the president of the Federation of Indian Geosciences Scientists Association, IGU, ISPRS, and Indian Mangrove Society. Thank you very much, Dr. Naik, for agreeing to be a keynote speaker in this important session. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Srinivas, for this very kind and generous introduction. And I'm extremely happy to be here and participate in this first session on the blue economy. And also I'm very happy that very distinguished panelists also are there, and I'm sure that we will have a very fruitful and meaningful discussion at the end of this presentation. The blue economy, as we identify, is, sorry. Movie. We identify as an ocean-dependent economy, which is essentially to improve the quality of life of people, but at the same time, we ensure the ecological and environmental security. So I think the basic definition itself in the blue economy, the sustainable, it is a part of it. And there are several issues, maybe different country may have different kinds of issues, but in India we have identified these are the major issues. One is related to sustainable fisheries and coastal ecosystems, the coastal and deep mineral and energy resources. And since most of this work will need facilities on the coast, infrastructure, etc., we need a coastal marine spatial planning. And in India, we have a coastal regulation zone for the restricting certain activities on the coast. Also, various hazards, maybe cyclones, tsunamis, sea level rise, also we need to address, and what kind of a response mechanism. There are various international engagements and the laws, treaties, guidelines. I think all this has to be integrated when you plan for the blue economy. There are many other sectors like shipping, manufacturing industry, security, and one of the most important, that what should be the accounting framework, because many of this area which about especially coastal ecosystem, we don't really account their contribution. So this is another area. And as in the morning, the Secretary mentioned about the policy is being formulated. And I think these are the major things. I won't go into the details of each of this because of the constraint of the time. I'll pick up 3 or 4 as the time permits, to have some discussion, and then if there are any issues, we can have a discussion during the panel discussion. The first is, of course, the sustainable utilization of the marine bioresources. And in India, we have what we call as a potential fishery services, which provides the advisories to all the fishermen, about 100,000 fishers daily, to where they should go and fish. And the basic idea is that by providing them a potential fishing grounds or product fishing grounds, the effort to catch unit of a fish catch, the efforts are reduced because the searching time is reduced, and as you know, the cost is about 60 to 70% is the cost. And this will also reduction in the fuel cost, and also that much less carbon dioxide is put into the atmosphere. So it has also the environmental benefit and the economic benefit. And this is also the last several years, this has been provided about 20 years or so. And the capture fishery is roughly around 3.8. It doesn't vary too much, while the total yield estimates is around 5.31. So we are fishing within the sustainable limits. And this additional income per trip is about $250. So it's a huge economic benefit. And because of that, there are many other social benefits are also coming to this. So this is the one which is very important. And this is now required to be further complemented by the annual prediction of the pelagic fishery stock. We know that the pelagic fishery stock is basically, we need to understand the physical, chemical, biological processes. Of course, this vary from species to species, but this, if we can understand and if we can model, we would be in a position to provide the annual likely production of a pelagic fishery, and accordingly the fishing strategy can be planned. Now, a lot of work has been done, but I think this system is yet to be modeled, and a robust model yet to be formed, and this can be further operationalized to actual practice. There are many other areas which is being or need to be addressed. One, in India, mostly these fisheries are coastal fishery. The deep water fisheries are yet to be addressed, and there are several new grounds which has been found, which are up to 2,000 meter depth, and the total potential is about 3.3 million tons. But of course, these needs a lot of development of harvesting, post-harvesting technologies, and how to make these commercial ventures. So these are the areas which we need to address. The mariculture is another very important area, and the cage culture, which is now been demonstrated very successfully in the southeast coast of India. This needs to be further adopted by the fishermen, and that is another area which would definitely provide additional income to the fishermen. The ornamental fishery, this has been now successfully demonstrated in the Black Sweep Island, and this is one of the more important because this is being run by the women's cooperative in the islands. And this kind of an experiment needs to be further upscaled for the commercial production. There are many bioactive molecules, and they have been found in the various areas from flora and fauna, from the deep sea, and many areas. But of course, the synthetic production of this molecule is underway. So there may be many such bioactive molecules, but it needs to be translated into synthetic production of those molecules for the successful drugs. At the same time, we need also to address the marine biodiversity is very important. and what is the impact it has on the both our anthropogenic or human activities and of course the climate change. Now, there are various estimates available, the loss which is happening, but we have to actually record, and this is the program what we call as a census of marine life, that each 3 degree by 3 degree grid has to be surveyed right from the surface to the deep sea for all kinds of species, and we need to see how the changes are occurring to understand this. I think this is very important, and over the obese program, the Indian obese program is also being carried out in India, and a lot of information has been collected with the support of the many other member states in the Indian Ocean. But however, I think you can see that there is large amount of gaps yet to be filled. So this is another very huge activity which is also very critical in the long term for sustaining the life in the sea. The ocean, coastal minerals and the energy resources is the next very important area, and there are large amount of coastal placer minerals on the southwest and southeast coast of India, and it's basically ilmenite, rutile, garnet, zircon, kyanite, sillimanite, monazite, and many others. And this ilmenite reserves are one of the largest, about 22% of the world reserves. And these are available both on as a beach sands as well as in the near shore. And the further exploration for the near shore is currently underway. And the total value of these reserves is about 150 billion. So this is one major. Also, the lot of indigenous mining and beneficiation techniques already have been developed and is available. So once these are started mining, probably all this can lead to a major employment generation and the economic benefits. The deep sea minerals, India, of course, is a polymetallic nodules. It's a huge area of this beyond 400,000 meters. The 75,000 square kilometer has been already surveyed, and the beneficiation plants processes have been developed, and the first mining site is also been identified by 12.5 kilometer by 12 point. And the total value as per current is about 187 billion. So this is a huge resource, but of course there are other issues which are now being addressed is about environment, that if you mine, what kind of environmental damage could occur or how long it may take for the system to come back. So these are some of the studies which is underway. Similarly, the polymetallic sulfides at the hydrothermal vents is a very important source of copper, lead, zinc, along with the gold and silver. So the current exploration work is going on in the 10,000 square kilometer area. Now, it is also a lot of other science aspects of this hydrothermal vents, which can tell us about how the lithospheric mantle has evolved, and also about the origin of life. As you know, the origin of life, they say that it evolved in this kind of hydrothermal vents, but the question is whether life is still originating or it was long back only. The cobalt is now very important and critical metal in high-tech industries and very strategic importance. There are deposits have been located, what is called as a cobalt-enriched ferromanganese crust on the seamounts, and the further exploration has to be taken up. Gas hydrate is another major, which is ice-like crystalline form of methane, and could be another major source of a relatively clean energy. And there is a huge resource of the gas hydrates. And there are a lot of development is done by the Department of Hydrocarbons and the ONGC, and the major two areas in the Mahanadi and Andaman Nicobar has been. Now, but the issue is how we can harness this source without allowing methane to escape. So there are some technological issues which needs to be addressed. And these are some of the technology which has already been developed. Essentially a soil tester, because any activity on the seabed, you need to understand the strength of the seabed. So the soil tester has been developed. The remotely operable vehicle, which can hold a payload of 150 kg, it's been developed, and this can also go up to 6,000 meters. The crawler, which can mine the nodules up to 6,000 meters, has been also developed, and the core, which you can make up 100-meter core, which you can take up to 3,000 meter depth, is also available. So there are many other technologies which is undergoing a development, and today morning also mentioned about Deep Ocean Mission, which addresses many such issues which are further to be developed. The water is going to be a very critical fresh water, and especially some of the islands, in the coral islands, and there are many islands of this. In India, the Lakshadweep Islands, the coral island, where the water is a problem. And the technology called low temperature thermal desalination has been developed, and which provides about 150,000 liters per day of fresh water to the islanders. And this has been very successful, and now similar thing are being placed in another 6 islands. The other is similar technology can also be used in the thermal power plants, which also generate a lot of wastewater. Now that can be used to make the drinking water or water for also boiler. And the important thing, we need also to scale up this to a larger, let's say 10 million liter per day on the offshore plants is also being now thought of. Now these are very important because any activity on the ocean or on the coast will require large amount of the fresh water. And this is the technology which has been demonstrated. It's been working very well in thermal power plants or on the islands and needs to be scaled up to a higher level. Now, all this work which we are going to do is coastal marine spatial planning is essentially a tool which allows us to different requirement of the different sectors. So how do we manage for the sustainable development? And in India, we have what we call as a coastal regulation zone notification, which has been modified as per requirement in 91, 2011, and very recently in 2019. Essential idea is to conserve the coral and marine, coastal and marine ecosystems and regulate or restrict certain activities on the coast, near coast, so that the ecology of both of coastal and marine is preserved. And this is one of the very important aspects which is being done. And the entire coastal zone management plans for the country on a very high scale is available. And the information also about the coastal land use, the changes which are occurring, vulnerability, all this information is available. Also, India provides, very ocean state advisory for safe shipping and navigation system, as well as the vulnerability and the warning system. All this has to be integrated into coastal marine spatial planning, which has the different components so that we can provide necessary advice to all sectors that how we should manage the coastal and marine areas for preserving the ecology. And we also think that in the future for the blue economy, there would be climate change advisories would be very critical, essentially which will provide seasonal to decadal timescale predictions on sea level changes, on cyclone intensity and frequency, storm surges, the biogeochemistry, primary productivity, how the fishery, we have noticed that there are species regime shifts in sardine and mackerel on the west coast, which was available only on the southwest coast. Now it is available in the entire west coast as well as on the east coast. And of course, the ocean health is one very important area. I think the economic growth prospects beyond 2030 will be very much required large investment into the coastal and ocean environment. And the Deep Ocean Mission is the beginning to understand, to increase our knowledge about the ocean and to develop various technologies to harness the resources has already been launched. Now, one of the most important aspects is that the large amount of scientific data has been collected on the various issues, right from the physical, geological, biological, and chemical data, which we need to now integrate with the environmental, social, and economic data. That is how we can have the accounting system. And this is an area which needs a collaboration between the countries, between the different sectors, to have that the method or a model to integrate this can come up. Also, we will need an institutional framework that how the investment into the various aspects are to be governed and provided direction is also a necessary. And I think we will have to manage and account this ocean as a very important asset, and that will lead to sustainable growth. And I would end my talk with this, how inappropriate to call this planet Earth when it is clearly ocean. I think this is, we will have to depend on ocean more and more in coming areas. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naik, for this excellent presentation. We will actually take questions after all the presentations are over. So until then, I'll request the audience to kindly, if you have any questions or clarifications that you need, or do you want to discuss issues that you need discussed in the panel, please actually put them in the chat, either in the YouTube or in the live platform or in the MS Teams. So we will actually take them up together at the end of all the 4 presentations. Thank you very much once again. And let us move on to our next speaker, Dr. Arnab Das. Dr. Das is an emeritus resource faculty at the School of Integrated Coastal and Maritime Security Studies of the Rashtriya Raksha University. Dr. Das is an Indian Navy veteran with over 2 decades of active services spread over sea tenures, R&D assignments, training duties, and dockyard exposure. He has delivered multiple strategic R&D projects and made pioneering contributions towards innovative indigenous technology development. Dr. Das is a master's and PhD from IIT Delhi on underwater signal processing and has close to 100 research papers and a book on underwater technology and maritime strategy. He's an expert on underwater domain awareness, framework for facilitating safe, secure, and sustainable growth in the tropical littoral waters, specifically in the Indian Ocean region. Over to you, Dr. Das. Thank you for agreeing to be on this panel, and the floor is yours for the presentation.
Thank you so much, sir, for a very generous introduction, and I must thank that it's a privilege for me to be speaking at this forum. There are a galaxy of stars here, people who have been learning a lot, and I've grown up looking up to them. I think the introductory speaker, Shelly Naik sir, has really beautifully put the entire spectrum of blue economy. And I would like to focus on the underwater domain awareness, where we are doing a little bit of work. And here it is largely the acoustic work that we are progressing. So I call it a safe, secure, sustainable growth, because I think there's a lot of people contributing to various aspects of the ocean. But I think a more comprehensive framework is required, because even when we talk about the maritime domain awareness, the underwater has its own unique challenges and opportunities, and that's where our focus is. I mean, the entire digital ocean now, it's a lot of work is happening. IIOSC itself is leading a lot of work. The Ministry of Earth Sciences is driving a lot of ambitious projects. So we thought that it will be our effort to complement what is going on and take it forward. Going forward, yeah. So I'll try and cover under these heads. Now, in the 21st century, one can easily make out that the entire maritime interactions have come to the tropical waters. And the tropical waters, as we all know, has their unique challenges on multiple fronts, whether it is political, economic, physical, I mean, the sonar performance itself. So we need to, I mean, we all know that the larger underwater technology developed during the Cold War, but that time the requirement was different. I mean, it was the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, where the underwater conditions are very, very different. But in the tropical waters, we know there is very different challenges. The sonar performance degrades substantially. So, and I think we all agree that acoustics is the main means of doing any kind of underwater domain awareness. And that's why I thought that there'll be a lot of opportunity to contribute and take things forward. Now, Indo-Pacific strategic space, as we all know, is in the strategic circles. This is the area everybody talks about. But coming down to the crux of it, you will see that it is the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So again, the tropical component becomes extremely important. It has many opportunities also. I mean, in terms of the resources also, I think the tropical waters have a lot to offer. So now, even in India, if you see, there is a lot of consciousness in terms of the maritime. I mean, we have more than 7,000 kilometers of coastline. But I think in the 21st century, we are seeing a whole lot of attention on multiple fronts. I mean, whether it is strategic security or blue economy, or even from the scientific perspective, Ministry of Earth Sciences is really spearheading a very, very ambitious program. And I think there is a lot more to be added from all the stakeholders. But again, when we have so much activity going on, then we have to also be mindful of the sustainability concerns that arise out of such activities. As we all know, the higher maritime activity also generate that much more noise underwater, and the acoustic habitat degradation is something and the book that I have written is about the acoustic habitat degradation, how the technology challenges and how from a strategic perspective we can take care of the acoustic habitat degradation. Now, largely when we talk about governance or we talk about any kind of efforts, the domain awareness and maritime domain awareness is a term that came into prominence after the 9/11 incident in the US. Globally, there was a lot of effort, of course, led by the US establishment, but a lot of entities contributed to it. And even in our waters, that is the Indian Ocean, after the 26/11, maritime domain awareness became a very, very common term in the strategic discussions. But the worry here is that it remained security driven. So it also brings in a lot of limitation in terms of interactions between various stakeholders, and even the scientific community, I think, finds it hard to kind of collaborate across, and there was a lot of limitations from that side. And also, if we see the MDA, even in the US, there's a very famous article, Maritime Domain Awareness Myths versus Reality by Commander Borres of the US Navy. And he very clearly brings out the limitations of the MDA in the US. And even in India, I think there's a lot of distance to be covered because underwater has its own unique challenges. Now, very clearly, there are 4 stakeholders when we talk about the UDA: security, blue economy, environment and disaster management, and science and technology. Just to elaborate, I mean, from the security perspective, even in this part of the world, if you see the Indian Ocean or the Indo-Pacific, there are so many countries who are looking at underwater submarine deployment, and the submarine proliferation has become very, very important. And there are nuclear submarines also in the game. So now, apart from the military requirements of the nations who are investing, it is also a safety concerns from various other people around. I mean, the communities that are around, our nations in the region. And the internal security, we had this 2611. There are a lot of challenges in terms of managing security aspects, and also huge migrations have already started and a lot more are expected. In terms of blue economy, we know it very well. I mean, the Indian Ocean is the hub for energy security. Even from the food security, if you look at it, lot of resources are available. But on one end, there is the fish stock is on the decline. I mean, there is credible inputs that are there. But at the same time, we also have a lot of bycatch. I mean, the practices are such that the bycatch is also extremely high. So how do we balance? How do we bring regulations to manage this more effectively is something we need to look at. Offshore oil rigs are there. Deep ocean mission is something very, very important. It is too much for us to say that I mean, we cannot stop the economic growth, or we should not try to stop the economic growth. But with better domain awareness, I think we can navigate a sustainable path. In terms of environment and disaster management, with increasing activities, I think acoustic habitat degradation is another big issue which requires to get attention. And we need to really put in a lot of effort to understand what it is and how we can navigate this. And disaster management, of course. I mean, these strandings have become very important. We are increasingly seeing natural disasters. And on one end, we are looking at massive investments. And if there is a natural disaster, so much of the investment goes haywire. So we need to have a very, very clear understanding, and like climate change also, how to predict is something very, very important. And those kind of efforts are very, very important. Of course, science and technology. I mean, if you just focus on the Indian Ocean, our understanding of the ecosystem that exists below the water is, I think, a lot more work is required to be done. So how do we bring that into our scientific effort? And also monitoring what is happening below the surface. I mean, a lot of smart technologies now, AI and robotics is coming up in a big way. I don't think, I mean, even if you just talk about India's EEZ, it is 20 lakh square kilometers. So I don't think we can put so many sensors. So how do we build big systems or smart systems that can really give us much better situational awareness is something we need to really look at and take things forward. How various components, I mean, the research institutes, academia, industry, everybody, how they can come together to build a larger system is something, and a very cutting edge research is required. So that is something we need to really look at. A lot more has happened, but I think there is still a lot more distance to be covered. This is the framework that we have proposed. If you look at the 4 faces of the cube, they represent the various stakeholders, whether it is security, blue economy, environment and disaster management, or science and technology. But the core will remain the acoustic capacity building. I mean, just to give you a sense, in the tropical water, in the temperate waters, when these sonars are tested, it gives you about 32 nautical miles. I'm talking about a specific sonar. But the same sonar, when it comes to the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean, the performance degrades to almost 5 to 6 nautical miles. So that is the kind of, we are looking at almost 60% degradation in the sonar performance. Unless we can do something about the sonar performance, or in direct terms, the acoustic capacity building, we will not achieve what we want to do. So there is a lot of work requires to be done. And then looking at the vertical construct, if you see, we have very little understanding of what is there below water. So a lot of sensing is required, application specific analysis, and also then we should be attempting at policy or regulation. I mean, many times we see in developing nations, the entire policy is also kind of taken from the West or from developed nations. But our conditions are totally different. So we need to be mindful of what it is, and we need to look at it from that perspective. And if you look at those smaller cubes, I mean, we have a huge population, young, aspirational, young India, as we call it. They can be involved. I think even the common people are not so much involved in matters ocean. or matters maritime. So how do we bring them, young students, how do they get involved is something we need to look at. This is just a translation of the larger UDA framework into something like underwater radiated noise management. I mean, one is Navy requires it from a defense perspective, acoustic stealth. Similarly, acoustic habitat degradation is required for the blue economy, and also our ship designers, because in the lower frequency, shipping noise is the most dominant noise. So how all of them can come together, contribute towards research and scientific development, and then benefit out of it. So those kind of frameworks needs to evolve. Similarly, sediment management. I mean, you have multiple stakeholders. There are such major projects announced in this part of the world. Sediment management is a very, very important issue, but still I see a lot of individual efforts or fragmented efforts. A lot of synergizing is required. I mean, basically, we are talking about pooling of resources and synergizing of efforts. This is a larger framework. I mean, in an Indian context, if you see, there is so many programs already part of the government. We are happy to say that Niti Aayog has been very kind in India to recognize our effort, and we are working with them how to bring a policy framework. You can see a lot of already announced government schemes, which just needs to be integrated into the UDA framework, and it can do wonders in terms of the digital ocean focus that we have. This is just one example of something which we have created. If you look at the map, we have divided the entire EZ into smaller grids of 5 by 5 kilometers. And what we have done is, based on the automated identification data, AIS data, we have the shipping traffic, and that has been converted into the underwater noise each of those platforms will create. I mean, this is a purely AI-based solution algorithm, and we get a real-time map, and it has also got the underwater channel modeling done. So it is not something which is on the surface. I mean, it is of the real conditions of that particular area. So a lot of data now, organizations like IIOSC are also generating so much more data. So just that a step forward to translate it into more application based solutions. And you can see this map can be used for even marine mammal strandings. I mean, what you see in the West Coast, the noise is very high. Even policy interventions can be brought in. And this can also be used for any underwater deployments. So I think value proposition of a digital ocean or an underwater domain awareness or enhanced underwater domain awareness is, I think, very well known. I mean, so much has been spoken about even what you call spatial planning, and with better underwater domain awareness, I think everything can be managed in a more effective manner. All the challenges and opportunities can be very, very easily managed. I would propose, I mean, that's what we are trying to push, acoustic capacity and capability building, and outreach where a lot of sensitization is required. I find even among the policymakers, the nuances are still not very clearly known. So a lot of outreach is required to sensitize everybody. Then we need to look at engagement. I mean, here engagement at all levels. I mean, at the stakeholder level, even at the ground level, where we need to have a lot of underwater domain awareness fellowships given to young students and young professionals who can come into this and build careers on this, and then sustain. I mean, do very specific projects to develop our understanding and also policy interventions. And I would propose a center of excellence. This is a unique model we have proposed, where there will be 5 sub-centers, a detailed research center where multidisciplinary students can come in, work and contribute. Second is an incubation center. We've had a lot of young people coming and working with us. A lot of startup ideas are there, because a lot of it has to be done in a very agile manner, and only startups can kind of bring that agility. So an incubation center, a skilling center, because a lot of skilling is required. I mean, people are really not aware of certain ways of doing things. Then academic center, where degree programs are required, and also then policy center. If all of them can come together and work under one umbrella, I think we can achieve much more out of this. We have been trying to do certain things in a small way. UDS Summer School is a 6 weeks project-based internship. It's a fully residential program we do at the national level, and now we are also trying to see that we can bring countries in the region together. You can see we have been supported by various organizations for this, and we seek more collaboration going forward. Students and young professionals from all over the country have come and participated. We have done it for 3 years, 17, 18, 19, and then the pandemic had a little kind of issue. So last 2 years, we've not been able to do it. And as things open up, we'll definitely go forward. So these are some of the pictures. We've had very senior people coming and giving a lot of time and spending a lot of time with these young people. And the results were very, very encouraging. We also do a lot of field-based work. Khadakwasla Lake in Pune, we have been doing a lot of deployment, data collection, analysis. Even PhD students have benefited from our work. You can see that. A lot of different instruments have been deployed, a lot of data has been collected, and we like to take forward many such work in various conditions. I mean, freshwater, and like now we also are focusing on the Brahmaputra quite a lot, and a lot of effort is going on a multidisciplinary front. That's it from my side, and I think I'm well in time, and yeah, I would like to keep it that way.
Thank you very much, Dr. Das, for your very crisp and very informative presentation. You actually also kind of tried to put forward the point on how acoustic capacity, in addition to strategic applications that a lot of scientists know that it can be used for. You're also telling how actually it can be used for scientific applications, blue economy, environmental and disaster management applications. Very interesting. Thanks for that presentation. And then we will actually see if we have any questions from the floor. We'll touch base with you again during the discussions.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the next presentation. Next presentation is on Nekton's Indian Ocean Mission 2018 to 22. It's a joint presentation by Professor Oliver Steeds and Dr. Sheena Talma is going to actually make the presentation. Dr. Sheena Talma is a marine scientist from Seychelles with a keen interest in learning more about how we use the ocean and the implications of overfishing, marine pollution, and climate change in that relationship. Sheena holds a postgraduate degree in fisheries and ichthyology. Prior to this, Sheena worked for the Ministry of Environment, Energy and Climate Change in Seychelles, working towards environmental sustainability. The floor is yours, Dr. Sheena, for a presentation on Nekton's Indian Ocean Mission.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me today and for having me present. It's a real pleasure to be here. And as you said, I'll be giving a little bit of overview of the work that Nekton has undertaken within the Indian Ocean and the plans going forward. So hopefully by now everyone can see my screen.
Yes, please go ahead.
Perfect. So like you said, my name is Sheena Talma. I'm from the Seychelles. I'm not quite yet a doctor, maybe sometime in the future. But like I said, it's a real pleasure to share the floor with so many great names and to be able to share my own experiences with the rest of you. So something that was said earlier on, and it is obviously true, is the fact that if you look at planet Earth, as we call it, it's really planet ocean. And a lot of our ocean is actually deep sea. When we talk about the deep sea, we're talking about waters below 200 meters. Now, these habitats comprise 95% of habitable space on the planet and convey many benefits to society. The deep sea is heterogeneous. It comprises unique habitats like hydrothermal vents that was spoken about previously, and cold water coral reefs. And unfortunately, its exploration is limited, largely because of the various equipment that is required that is often very expensive, or people do not necessarily have as much capacity to be able to operate them. So Professor Lucy Woodall and myself, Professor Lucy Woodall, works with Nekton as a principal scientist. undertook a short study for the Nairobi Convention that we presented last year with regards to how much research was actually happening within the deep sea in the Western Indian Ocean. And if we have a look at that, we will notice that our review across 25 years showed that only 43 peer-reviewed publications were available, with the first being published in and around 1995. And basically what has come out from that short undertaking is the fact that research opportunities and survey efforts are not equally distributed, and they remain very low, especially within the Western Indian Ocean. And that we need to do more research within this area to better understand what lives within our ocean. So Nekton has three main pillars, and these are applied research, inspirational communication, and knowledge exchange. Applied research, this is led and coordinated with the host country that we work with, where the questions are brought about together. Inspirational communication, as was said previously, it is not enough to just do science. We have to be able to communicate what we do with various stakeholders, including other scientists, including students and older generations. And of course, knowledge exchange, really understanding that we all have different types of knowledge, and bringing people together enables a different type of knowledge exchange to occur so that our expertise can be shared. So I'll briefly go through the setup that we use. This was specifically used with the Seychelles. As we work with different countries, the route we take differs. But in 2019, we took on an expedition with the Seychelles. And some of the first steps, of course, includes establishing partnerships and planning. These are some of the most important undertakings that you can do when undertaking any kind of field phase, but any kind of monitoring or any kind of science endeavor or research endeavor. Now we have an alliance of different partners, and these different partners enable the missions to happen. Within the country, so specifically within Seychelles, we partnered with the Seychelles government, and their leading office was the Ministry of Environment. And of course, they were the ones who kind of culminated all the other partners around a table so that we could actually discuss what were the needs with regards to the exploration of the deep sea. Now, the Seychelles at this point were on the verge of completing their marine spatial planning. So they were well versed with stakeholder meetings, and we learned a lot from them from that process. One of the most important things that we undertook was being able to have multiple days of workshops pre-expedition and pre-doing deep sea work, where we were able to discuss what were the needs that were required from an expedition exploring our deeper ocean. And when I say exploring our deeper ocean, I mean below 200 meters. And after all this planning, which took about 9 months, this is the shortest but the most exciting part, the field phase. The field phase only lasted about 6 weeks, but of course required a lot of planning to come together. Now, we had over 30 international partners enabling this to happen, and we had over 50 people on board and a vast number of equipment. So if you're out at sea, you might as well try and collect as much data and have as many partnerships so that you can ensure that the work that you do is productive. So as you can see, we had submersibles, we had ADCPs, we had a CTD which collects temperature and salinity. We had simple equipment like Nekton nets to allow us to understand what kind of zooplankton we were collecting at the different islands, and also to understand whether there were differences between the day and night of zooplankton samples. And of course, we had the ability to communicate to the outside world while we were on the ship. This was really important because we could also communicate below water to the people that were in submersibles, to allow the projection of those experiences to happen not just to the people on board, but also to the viewers that were connecting through media. So where did we go? So the expedition started off in Mahe, which is the main island of the Seychelles, and moved through Aldabra, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Astove, which is part of the Aldabra group, and then moved further up back to Alphonse, another coralline island. We stayed in this area for quite a few days, and then made our way back to Mahe. So as you can see, quite a couple of weeks out at sea, and ensuring that the time spent there was essentially as productive as possible. So some of the equipment we use and some of the data that we produced includes bathymetric information, being able to visualize what these underwater structures look like is really important for understanding possible fishing grounds, possible areas that are perhaps less prone to climate change, etc. Like I said, we had submersibles on board, and these were used for two primary scientific data collection points. The first being transects. So we would do transects from 0 to 300 meters, where we were able to collect visual data that we can then analyze with our partners. And we also had a sub that would be used for collecting specific biological samples at the different depths. One of the things that is really striking and something that, you know, really enabled us to share the story and make it visual so that people do get interested is how these communities change as we go further down into our ocean. For example, and all of this footage is taken from Astove at the very shallow depths, lots of light and lots of bustle and hustle, very much like a city on a busy day. And as we move to about 30 to 60 meters, the structure begins to change, and you can see how the light regime also changes. And moving on down to 120 meters, the coral life begins to be a little more foreign than what we're used to, and perhaps not what most people are used to seeing. And of course, at around 250 meters, this is quite different. It looks a bit like what I would imagine being on the moon is like. And life down here is a little slower, and I like to describe it like our capital city here in Seychelles, Victoria. Very quiet on a Sunday afternoon, nothing much happening. But of course, what we also see is the environmental impacts that coral bleaching, for example, is causing. This is two side-by-side photos of two separate islands. Astove had the most beautiful corals, and we attribute that perhaps because of the location. It's on a reef slope, and there are lots of cooler currents perhaps coming up, ensuring that it doesn't get too warm. But Poivre on the shallow areas and the deeper areas where we saw a lot of coral bleaching. So of course, like I said previously, we the impact that we were able to have was largely because of the ability to communicate what we were seeing at the same time. So like previous speakers have said, the power of being able to communicate and speak to other people is really important. And this is something that we ensure is part of our program. But of course, at the end of the field phase, this is when the real work starts. And one of the most important things that we wanted to ensure is that our relationship with the Seychelles did not just end after the field phase. We held 2 separate training and taxonomic workshops. These were desired by the island. So during our planning phase, we asked what kind of outcomes they would like with regards to skills training. So these were curated based on the partnership needs. The taxonomic workshop saw a host of taxonomists from the Western Indian Ocean region and abroad come together in South Africa and start going through the samples to see whether they're new species, etc. And our second workshop that we did was locally within the Seychelles, and this was focused, like I said, based on needs that the stakeholders had identified. They include things like training on how to use BRUVs, which are baited systems, stereo systems that we put in the water to be able to understand what kind of predators are in an area. And how to not just deploy them, but then how to also analyze that data. And of course, the other really important sections is data analysis. This is still ongoing, as many of you in the room, I'm sure, will know, is that these take a really long time. So we're currently in the process of analyzing some of the data that was collected in partnership with the stakeholders from the Seychelles. And we were able to share some of this information at a symposium that was done remotely, unfortunately, in 2020, and came together with other partners within the Seychelles so that we could make it a bigger event and have more kind of presentations, etc. So some of the publications that we are currently working on and we have been able to publish include the Reef Benthos of the Seychelles, which is a field guide, and this was based largely on the imagery that we were able to collect during the expedition, and this was conducted with a plethora of scientists from around the world that contributed to the identification of these different species. We also are very passionate about sharing and talking about co-development and co-production of work, because we believe that, essentially the best way to do things is in partnership, and that we all get the most out of any kind of program if it is done in partnership with a wide group of stakeholders. So you're probably asking, okay, so this is what you guys have been up to. What's next? So COVID, unfortunately, did hinder one of our major second expeditions within the Western Indian Ocean, which was meant to go down to full ocean depth. And unfortunately, we had to postpone that. And this will be coming soon. But we have been working with our main partner, the Seychelles, so far, to implement other programs and understand needs. So, for example, we're working together with the Seychelles on a new project called the Western Indian Ocean Resilience and Prosperity Initiative. This is going through the Nairobi Convention to be able to collate and pull together voices from the Western Indian Ocean with political will to come up with joint solutions for some of the issues that our oceans are facing. In addition to that, there are really important points that have come up with regards to not just doing expeditions, but also being able to create an online lecture, for example, to be able to get more of the youth involved in and interested in the deep sea and the vast amount of knowledge that we still need to acquire with regards to our deeper oceans. So like I said, what's up next is our Maldives Nekton expedition, and this has been confirmed for later this year, so watch the space. And yes, one of the most important things, like I said, is our partnerships, and we're always happy to chat further with anyone interested in the work that we envisage and are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Talma, for that wonderful presentation. In fact, yeah, Nekton's Indian Ocean mission has also been, endorsed as, as one of the projects under IIOE2 in July 2017. And then it's really glad to see the kind of progress that you've made, and then, the plans that you have. So thank you. Please, hang on there for the panel discussion. I'm sure there'll be questions from the audience. Thank you once again for the presentation before we move on to the next presenter. So the next presenter is Professor Ken Finley, who will be talking about ocean accounting. Ken is the research chair of Oceans Economy at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology in Cape Town, South Africa. He also directs the Center for Sustainable Oceans, focusing on ocean economies and governance and ecosystem-based management approaches to balancing ocean health and human benefits from ocean space. Ken is a marine mammal biologist. He has been integrally involved in marine mammal research in Southern Africa and Arabian Sea, West Indian Ocean, and Southern Ocean for the last 30 years. He's a member of the Scientific Committee of the International Whaling Commission, and he's a member of both the IUCN Cetacean Specialist Group and the Sarinian Specialist Group. So, Ken, thank you very much for joining us and then agreeing to give this talk. I hand over the floor to you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm assuming that you can hear me and that you can see my screen. Thank you. The first thing I'd like to do, Chair, is just to acknowledge some co-authors in this presentation, both Jordan Gakutan and Tanya Lairo. And I also would like to acknowledge the general input of the Global Oceans Accounting Partnership members in discussions in formulating some of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about this morning. In that regard, I did have a message from the GOAP Secretariat this morning early, Dr. Ben Milligan, who conveys his sincere apologies about not being able to make the moderation this morning. So without further ado, let me just go straight into this. And what I really would like to, what I'm really encouraged to hear is that we've already heard people talking about ocean accounting this morning. Dr. Nayak, in his item 3 of the way forward slide, really talked about ocean accounting and some of the things that I'm going to be talking about going forward from here. In order to really contextualize the talk I'm giving this morning, I think we must recognize some fundamental changes that are happening in the ocean. Firstly, ocean environments are changing. We're seeing huge changes in the ocean environment, and some of those have been referred to in terms of, for example, coral bleaching by the previous speaker. The other really important aspect that we need to acknowledge here, colleagues, is the fact that ocean resource uses are changing. We're seeing a massive increase in the advancement of oceans economies and blue economies, so changes in ocean resource use. And tied to this, I feel there's a massive change in ocean sciences. The way we monitor and observe the oceans has gone through, I think, massive change over the last 20 years. If I look at what I did 20 years ago to what I can do now in terms of remote sensing, in terms of robotics, etc., things have moved on. And all of these three changes really need to be contextualized in this talk, which is about ocean economies, blue economies, ocean sustainable development, and ocean governance. First of these, we must acknowledge that there are global increases in ocean economies and blue economies. Nations and regions are turning to their EEZs, their ocean spaces, for new opportunities to foster economic growth, to ensure food and energy security, etc. These are often called, within the myriad of images I have up on the screen, are often called ocean economies or blue economies. But as intimated by some of the speakers earlier, I would like to argue that there's a subtle difference between an ocean economy and a blue economy in terms of the blue economy concept, including aspects of sustainability, social equity, and what we call inclusivity. Very, very important aspects. But I do acknowledge that the blue economy terminology is being used in such a myriad of different ways. And here I'm really going to be talking about ocean sustainable development in that blue economy as a parallel to blue economy here. Ocean economies themselves can really be defined as the use of ocean resources for advancing economic system of ocean resource uses and associated production or even consumption activities. These activities we've heard about from previous speakers, but can clearly be defined as those which take place on, in, or under the ocean or associated with the ocean. They produce goods and services primarily for use on or in the ocean. They utilize non-living resources or living resources from the marine environment, and they gain a particular advantage by being located in proximity to the ocean. Very often in ocean governance, we require some idea of ocean value. Ocean governance often includes trade-off analyses. And when we do trade-offs, we have to have an idea of value. We're trading off different values. And ocean economies are often valued as gross value add contribution of economic sectors, fisheries, mining, shipping, tourism, etc., or activities to countries' gross domestic product. And I'm going to argue that there are quite large challenges in such an approach, in that contribution to GDP tells us nothing about natural capital, sustainability, and what's left in the ocean. It tells us nothing about inclusivity or social equity of where the benefits of a particular ocean economy accrue. They usually only measure market values. And I think we've heard this morning already, the incredible value of the non-market value of ocean resource uses. So what I'm saying here is that we need to look beyond the GDP approach in order to measure and value ocean space. If I look at a blue economy or ocean sustainable development model, I would consider three central pillars. And the first of these is exactly the same as an oceans economy. I'm not dismissing the importance of measuring ocean metrics. Thank you. And this ocean economy metric really talks about measuring the ocean economy. It's critical in aspects of macroeconomic planning for countries, for ocean strategic development, ocean investment, etc. That economic aspect is still a critical component of ocean governance. But there are two other pillars that are really important as well. And the first of these is the measure of well-being and the distribution of income, the inclusivity, where the opportunities of an ocean economy or ocean resource uses accrue. Who benefits from these activities? And the third of these, of course, is the sustainability. And this really talks about the opportunities that we have from an ocean economy need to be allocated between today and tomorrow to ensure a future, particularly in terms of the natural capital. And we've heard quite a lot about that from previous speakers. If we measure an ocean economy just as gross value add to the contribution of sectors to GDP, how do we evaluate the economic, social, and environmental components of ocean sustainable development? And here we turn towards oceans accounts. We turn towards ocean accounts that allow us to capture economic production, ocean health and wealth, sustainable resource use, and the distribution of benefits as income in an integrated model that I think is absolutely critical in terms of blue economy advancement. This is really a parallel to wealth accounting, and it includes all assets that contribute to our economic well-being. Built capital, human and social capital, natural capital, across a broad range of inputs. So what is oceans accounting? It's a manner of integrating records of economic activities and social conditions and environmental characteristics relating to the ocean, ocean resource uses, and the marine and maritime domains on a regular basis. Like any accounts, the regularity of the accounts is critical. And these use both international statistical standards, as set up out on the side here, systems of national accounts, system of environmental economic accounts, central framework, or ecosystem accounts, as well as novel approaches that we are developing within the Global Oceans Accounts Partnership that talk to aspects such as ocean risk and accounting of ocean risk, or ocean governance in order to mitigate or manage such risk. An oceans accounts framework that builds all these particular accounts together in an integrated framework can be considered a system of systems that allows the integration of stocks within systems, the measurement of stocks within systems, and the integration of stocks by flows between systems using both the recognized approaches. A lot of the work we do in this arena is through the Global Oceans Accounting Partnership. The website web address is up on the screen at the moment. And GoUp aims to measure and manage progress towards sustainable development through the integration of these environmental, social, and economic domain metrics. Working forward, there's an advanced technical document available on the GoUp website talking to the implementation of ocean accounts, and really looking towards the development of a oceans, really a standalone SEA oceans document that would allow integration and would allow the advancement of ocean accounts in a comparable manner across different regions and across different areas. What really are we looking at here? So the technical document of GoUp provides this general structure of the oceans accounts framework. It's relatively complex and it's relatively difficult to explain the way that it's put forward here, but it talks about environmental assets that are flowed to the economy, that there are flows from the economy back to the environment, there are governance aspects, but these result through oceans economies as an ocean wealth in a social and governance context. In order to clarify this a little better, the Africa Community of Practice within the GoUp arena has developed or expanded on this model in the following. And this really talks to ocean sustainable development. In the center, we utilize the system of national accounts in order to develop ocean economy satellite accounts that measure the economic contribution of particular sectors to a country's economy. Those sectors are very often dependent on natural capital, and the System of Environmental Economic Accounts Central Framework really looks at where those resources come from, the resource use, and these come from the environment. They come from either through ecosystem accounting or abiotic goods and services accounting, that we get an idea of the environment. The environment provides particular goods and services through ecosystem services or abiotic goods and services to the economy. We must never forget that economic sectors also have significant impacts on the ocean space. Some of those identified in the previous talk about ocean noise, for example. And these impact and pressure flows from economic sectors can be measured back to the environment. Important aspects of within this is that this economic component here doesn't capture non-market use or even non-use values that are quite critical in measuring ocean wealth. These have quite a significant bearing on welfare, which contribute to social accounts. But social accounts are also critical in terms of what is the economic income from particular ocean sectors and where do these incomes accrue demographically. by age, by gender, by particular area, etc. And so what we're seeing here is we're starting to see that we are utilizing discrete systems, a system of economic accounts, a system of ecosystem accounts, a system of social accounts, flows between these systems. But if we have flows back from an economy to an environment, what are the consequences thereof? And here we start needing to look at risk accounts, and we need to differentiate between what is natural risk, what is anthropogenic risk in terms of unsustainable extraction, pollution, habitat modification, climate change, invasive translocations, etc. And how do we govern those risks? Through governance accounts. What mitigation, what regulation, norms, policies, etc. do we put in place in order to manage those risks? The important part about this is if we have a particular economic activity, for example, that is going to put a pressure on a particular, let's say, for example, fish habitat, we're going to have declines in the ecosystem condition of that fish habitat as measured through ecosystem accounts. We're going to have declines in supply of ecosystem services, provisioning ecosystem services in terms of fisheries into the economic sector. Declines in supply means declines in use in the sector and declines in opportunities, for example, for fishers or anybody, any people involved in that particular fishing sector. Overall, the important aspect of this is that these allow us, these integration of these accounts through the flows between accounts allow for summary accounts that describe ocean wealth that is so inherently dependent on ocean health. That's absolutely critical here. And we see actually that this sort of ocean sustainable development that has these pillars of sustainability, inclusivity, and the economic aspects require models such as ocean accounting in which to integrate across these different domains. It is the only way that we can see of doing such integration. One of the important aspects is then where do the ocean data that I'm referring to in this talk, where are their inputs? And I think the important thing about it here is that depending on what type of ocean data we're talking about, we would apply data to each of these different systems. But a lot of the biophysical data that we often refer to as ocean data, the oceanographic data, the biological data, the biodiversity data, etc., talks directly to natural capital accounting, to ecosystem accounts that measure ecosystem types, ecosystem extents, and ecosystem conditions upon which so much of our oceans economy really depend. So what sort of data would we really be looking at there? And here I think what I'm trying to show here is that there are a number of different data types that we would use going forward here. For example, we are using quite extensively remote sensing, particularly in coastal areas, to define ecosystem extents and ecosystem conditions, mangroves, seagrasses, corals, etc. There are also the importance of in situ observations. I'm quite aware that some of these, in terms of gliders or in terms of moorings, etc., could be considered remote sensed in some aspects, but those measurements which we undertake at sea. But it's also important to realize the role of modeling, of taking the data a step further in the input into this central area here, which I'm really just describing as different spatial layers that we would use in ocean accounting or in marine spatial planning, for example. But critical within this, colleagues, is the integration of these sort of data that we collect as scientists with data that comes from stakeholders and the social sciences, as well as data that comes from industry and economic sectors. And ocean accounts allows us to integrate these sort of data sets. There are a number of challenges within the integration of such data. I think we all are really cognizant of the fact that ocean data is often very dynamic. There's a three-dimensional aspect. There's aspects of scale and resolution, particularly in modeling results. We have to treat the nearshore versus the offshore and ocean boundaries. Very often ocean boundaries do not coincide with political boundaries, and how do we account for these sort of transboundary aspects here. We need to also realize that much of what we do in oceans ecosystem accounts is on a spatial basis where we're looking at ocean environments. But when we start looking at sectoral accounts, we need to move from physical to monetarized, and the translation of an ocean asset in terms of a stock assessment into a TAC, a total allowable catch, into a catch, and from there into monetized values in an economic framework. We need to realize that a lot of these data are often highly siloed. They sit within particular government departments or particular entities, and collaboration and integration of data sets is absolutely critical in what we're referring to here. We need data sharing, but realizing that there are aspects of proprietorship and confidentiality. And then the final challenge that we are finding is that transdisciplinarity is absolutely critical here. We need to be able to look at data sets through the lenses of others. That fisheries biologists need to be able to look from an economic perspective, while economists need to look at these sort of data from fisheries biologists aspects as well. To finish up, what we're looking at here, how do we bridge the science policy gap? We've got changing ocean data, vast volumes of new data from robotics, remote sensing, earth observation, big data, analytics, machine learning, etc. These are providing us with huge new amounts of information of changing oceans in different disciplines, from oceanography to economic sciences. We need a common standardized framework in order to manage these hugely different or varying data sets. And we use ocean accounts to provide us accounts that are regular, that provide us with statistics of changing ocean resource uses. Because they're standardized and because they're regular, they allow us basically to develop indicators of ocean change. Those indicators are critical in the models and scenarios that we use in informed or evidence-based decision-making in policy development that links government authorities and societal users of the ocean space. So I've got a freeze on my, and basically here at really one of my final slides, I'm just putting forward, along with other ocean governance and management tools, such as marine spatial planning. We've heard about marine spatial planning earlier this morning. We believe that integrated ocean accounting has a critical complementary role to play in blue economy advancement and ocean sustainable development for a number of reasons. It allows for informed decision making with the policy development that extends from an ecosystem level to a national economic accounts level. It allows for the integration of large data sets of novel ocean data. It provides for a broader scope of evaluation than national accounts in terms of blue economy approaches to sustainability and inclusivity. Oceans accounts justify the value of ocean research, management and policy. And also it allows for strategic development in ocean economic advancement by integrating the social, the economic and the environmental, and not relying on the environmental alone. Your time, and I'll be very happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Ken, for that excellent presentation on ocean accounting. Actually, you've put forth the differences between ocean economy and blue economy, which are many times used very interchangeably. And then, of course, what are the environmental, economic, and social kind of data sets that need to be collected for the entire end-to-end ocean accounting. And of course, the challenges and the way forward for using this as a tool for policy making. So thanks. Please hold on. So now we'll actually start with the panel discussions. Thanks to all the 4 speakers for the excellent presentations. You also kept to the time, and then your talks were very focused. I'd like to thank the organizers for putting together such a nice group of keynote speakers. Actually, when the International Scientific Planning Committee met, one of the, in preparation for this conference, one of the major things, important points that they mentioned was that we should make these sessions, it's not just presentations, but they should be interactive. We should be able to get feedback from the audience from everybody who's attending the sessions. And then the idea is that the moderators can actually take back the learnings from the session and then present it to the panel discussion that we'll have on the last day, which will be chaired by Vladimir, on how we can really contribute to the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So the two questions that you have listed that I've also mentioned before, they actually talk about two challenges. That is on how to optimize the role of oceans in sustainably feeding the world's population, one challenge, and then the other one is on the probable solutions for equitable and sustainable development of ocean economy. Very apt questions, and then we have the right experts here who can actually really take us through those questions. Before we get there, I would actually try to take some questions from the participants. So let me go one by one. There are actually two questions to Dr. Naik. The first one is actually from Francis Marsak. The blue economy is to reconcile exploitation and sustainability of ecosystem and human activities. India is providing services to aid fisheries through potential fishing zones. So do you have any strategy to ensure that such kind of assistance does not increase fishing pressure on the fish stocks to an unsustainable level? We know in particular that the Indian Ocean yellowfin tuna stock is currently overfished. So yeah, we will actually hear to you, Dr. Naik, before we go to the next question.
Yeah, thank you, Srinivas. There's a very important question about this, and this, of course, we have been seeing this kind of questions for quite some time, and it's a very pertinent question. Now, as far as the general fishery is concerned, we have a pretty good data and on the coastal fishery that there is no overfishing. But as far as the tuna is concerned, especially yellowfin tuna, there is a large variability in the catch. If you see last 20-30 years data, you will find that there is a large variability. The second thing which is happening in last few years, especially after 85 and 90, we are seeing a definite impact of the global warming or the warming of the sea. And we have seen that the many fishery are shifting further northwards, also shifting at a greater depth. Of course, tuna can go much deeper, and they also go much deeper depth than what it used to be. The third thing is, on the coastal fishery, we have a ban during the spawning and breeding season. In the deep sea, there is no such ban to the best of my knowledge. And as you know that the tuna, normally it is January to April is the spawning period. I don't think such regulation exists. The fourth thing is that there is a lot of catch done by many other countries other than India as far as tuna is concerned. And there are no regulation as such on this. And many of them fish within the EEZ of India, but there is no effective way of policing this. And that is the another reason. But in the overall, I think we need some kind of regulation of the tuna fishery based on the what is likely potential, and of course for pelagic fishery it is much easier, but tuna it is more difficult. It moves pretty fast from one region to the another region, and there are many other issues. So our understanding about the tuna fishery, I would say, is not good enough as of now. And I think we need a little bit more analysis and studies related to tuna fishery. And I fully agree that any kind of overfishing has to be stopped. As far as the advisories are concerned, I don't think the advisories lead to any overfishing. Many people think that, by providing this advisory, you are directing them, but we are directing them to a productive zone, and any fish, any vessel cannot fish beyond its limit, because there is always a limit. And we have seen, we have a data for last 20 years, we have seen at least in coastal fishery, most of the fishing is done within the sustainable limit. Many people argue that in Kerala, the fish are not available, and but especially sardine and mackerel. But we found that this fishery has moved further northwards. Now you get a bumper catch on sardine on the Maharashtra coast, that is further northwards on the Indian west coast. So things have been changing, and I think important thing is that we need the information and data on variety of this thing. Apart from fishery per se, we also need information about the biophysical, geochemical data of the ocean to really understand what is happening. But I agree that we need to do whatever we can to stop the overfishing of any fishery, not only yellowfin, but any fishery. Thank you. I'm sure that this is not the actual answer to this, but I think in absence of the information, I can only articulate this much. Thank you very much for a very important question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Naik, for clarifying. Actually, yeah, like you said, this question keeps getting asked several times, and then we actually need to consider this as one tool in the overall fisheries management. And then, of course, that it helps the artisanal fishers more than actually the mechanized and motorized kind of vessels. Yeah, thanks for articulating it very well. I have one more question for you. One is actually, how do you envisage the governance structure for the blue economy framework in India? Because you have been involved very closely in the designing the framework document. So this is a question from Commander Srivastava, who's asking, how do you envisage the governance structure? And the other related one is, how do you visualize the manpower? That is, which is also very important. We need proper manpower and capacity development for all aspects of the blue economy. So over to you, sir, for your response.
Thank you very much, Prashant. I think this is a very important question. Of course, the governance, when we say, I would like to distinguish two things. The governance of the institutes which are involved into the various sectors of the blue economy. That is one aspect. And the second aspect is the governance of the policy. Now, what I personally believe that the governance of the policy has to be dependent on what is your basic objective. In the sense that, in my view, the blue economic policy should have a major objective of improving the quality of life of the people by utilizing the various resources available in the ocean. At the same time, keeping the ecology and environment of the ocean also intact. So we need to have stakeholders in all these aspects to manage the policy. And the policy is normally by the government. And as you know, you were asked questions specifically for India. In India, the executive responsibility of any policy lies with the respective minister of that. And I think the structure should have a minister at the helm of that, and all these sectors, which could be a shipping or a fishery or a local people or a mineral industry or trades, commerce, ports, energy, all these people should be represented, and they should think every 6 months or once in a year how this policy actually benefited for the purpose for which it has been issued, and especially whether the increased economic activity has adversely affected the coastal and marine ecosystem or not. So this governance structure should decide and make necessary corrections or changes if required. Now, to do that, actually, Professor Ken Finley has very nicely articulated these aspects, that all these aspects, how it ultimately leads to both economic development and ecological conservation. And that is our benchmark to see whether this policy is effective or not effective. And that is what I would call as a governance. But there are, when you have to regulate certain things, or when you want to make some rules, regulation or penalty not following, I think you will need beyond the policy, a bill which you will have to present to the parliament, which would plan and say that what is all about. So this is what my, very briefly, this subject itself, we can have a discussion for a long time, but this is what I would like to say, and I would be very happy to discuss with you in future. And the second question which you said, the capacity building, is a part of the policy. I mean, it cannot be treated separately. So you have to do it partly, part of the policy. But I think many times, we try to create new structures and new for the capacity. I think it is not necessary always to create new structures for this. The existing structures, I think the system which we have, a basic educational system, is extremely good enough and robust enough. Only thing what we need is some kind of a training after they acquire their basic degrees. They need to acquire certain skills to manage this. And that is where I think we need to have a concept of a training school, which we had the Ministry of Earth Science earlier. That is, I think, is most critical. You cannot keep on saying that this should be taught here, this should be taught there. See, these things are continuously changing. The people in a basic education degree would come with a basic understanding about this subject. But you need to further upgrade because things are changing pretty fast. I mean, what I studied 40 years back and what we are doing today is quite different. So you need to have a continuous upgradation of your knowledge and skill. And that is why I think the concept of a training school is, in my view, is a must if you really want to herald era of a blue economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naik. I'd like to quickly pass on the floor to Ken. I'm sure he'll have some, words to say about, the policy and governance matters on the note that you ended, Dr. Naik. Ken.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think if you take the two questions posed in the agenda in relation to food security and in relation to solutions for sustainability and equity, I really think that they are so intertwined that you have to treat them both together. I don't think that, that in terms of if you're going to optimize ocean utility in terms of food security, we have to do it sustainably. We have to do it inclusively. We have to ensure, we've heard about whether we're looking at artisanal or community aspects of tuna fisheries versus large multi or large commercials, etc. And so that balance is absolutely critical. And to me, Chair, that balance must be, or policy or regulation or norms resulting in order to drive that balance must be driven through evidence. We must be looking at evidence-based decision making and evidence. We must have the data. And I think that really one of the intriguing aspects, I think, of oceans accounting is that we may not have that data in place in order to answer those questions. But through that process, it identifies that we have the need for data or even for capacity development for collection of those data. So I think the framework goes a little bit further than just implementation. It's very useful in driving capacity development. It's very useful in driving. So it goes a step beyond policies. What I'm saying. But I really don't want to hog the floor here. But I do think that we can utilize a framework like this in both a descriptive and an analytical manner in terms of modeling and risk management that allows us to go as research, as policymakers, as research and as scientists to go to policymakers with the best available information for the best policy decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ken, for those comments. And I would like to now take back to a couple of questions from the floor. This time it's for Dr. Das. Dr. Das, this is a question from Francis Marsac. So you emphasize the habitat degradation and whale stranding due to noise, and shipping is probably the main source of underwater noise, and it looks challenging to mitigate those deleterious effects unless you reduce the maritime activities. So do you have any specific ideas on plans in this regard?
Thank you, Chair, for that question, and I did see that question there. Yeah, there are a couple of things which are important. I think the participation of the stakeholder is very much important. The shipping sector or the shipping industry is extremely against any regulation coming in, but the cause and effect inputs are extremely important. I mean, we developed the map that I showed in my presentation, if you remember. We have developed the entire framework on finding the cause of shipping. There are different types of propulsion machinery. There are different types of even the way the propagation happens in the tropical waters also has a role to play, because it has to be a source path receiver model. So a complete scientific input is very, very important, and we have been doing a bit of work. There's a lot of work happening all across, but the tropical waters do need a very different type of scientific effort also. So our paper had gone to the Marine Environment Protection Committee meeting last time, MEPC 76, on how this technology tool can help us identify the cause of although it faced a little resistance from the shipping industry in the beginning, but they got convinced at the end of it that yes, this can help. So it has to be a technology driven aspect. I mean, one is finding the cause. So finding the cause can help us put policy in place, of course, but also in terms of mitigating from the industry itself. I mean, how they can adapt technologies going forward. Now, IMO is definitely pushing for managing underwater noise in a very, very aggressive manner. But what I was trying to push this part of the world is that, you know, by just keeping quiet or ignoring these signals, you cannot get away. So unless we quickly get into this and start working on it, then only we'll be able to, find solution. Otherwise, typically what happens is the developing world is pushed to implement regulations set up by the developed world. But if we participate right from the beginning, then our industries will be better prepared. And also the tropical waters is different. So we can sometimes, if we have a regional framework, then probably we can ask for certain concessions based on our conditions to the global body and say that, you know, we will have our own standards. We don't have to follow your standards. I hope it answers. I mean, the technology tool that we have suggested gives you inputs for both policy intervention as well as technology intervention.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Das. Yes, we need more data. I think this came out in the earlier, Ken was mentioning, Dr. Naik was mentioning the dearth of data, across several, which is actually collected across several sectors. Might be available in different departments, and then, putting all this together, and then data-driven kind of, policy, and then taking it to the industry actually, and then, requesting them to take necessary actions. Everything should be based on data, scientific data. Ken, you had a comment. Please go ahead, Ken. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. If I can take my ocean accounting hat off and put my marine mammal hat on. Thank you, Dr. Das. That was a really great presentation, and I really encouraged to see the acoustic modeling that is being done in terms of shipping. I would like to just push a little bit harder for other industries over and beyond shipping, particularly oil and gas seismics and sonars, which we have a fairly clear idea are far more conducive to marine mammal strandings than shipping alone. But I think what I'm asking for is a more holistic, pretty well all of the acoustic industries rather than shipping alone, realizing that shipping plays a part of that. Thank you.
So thanks, Ken, for that note. And let's then move on to, Sheena. Sheena, so there is a question from Francis again, asking whether you were able to discover any new species in the surveyed areas during the Nekton's first descent mission. Floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you, Francis, for the question. And the simple answer is yes, but of course that will only be confirmed once it's published. I think one important point here is the fact that, if you go somewhere that hasn't been researched, you're bound to find new species or range extensions, right? And that is the case with regards to the expedition. And I think maybe just to add on to the conversations that's been really interesting to listen to all the viewpoints, is the fact, and something that keeps coming up is how joined we all are. And if we are going to, especially promote the blue economy, is to ensure that we don't lose connections between these different departments. We're all connected. Fisheries is connected to accounting, it's connected to the marine space. So how do we ensure that all these stakeholders have a seat around the table? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sheena. Yeah, I would like to actually take this discussion a bit further with you. In your presentation, you mentioned how opportunities are not equally distributed across the region, and you showed this map of Eastern Africa in the Western Indian Ocean. So is there, with your projects that you're doing with Nekton, do you think, like you mentioned, how applied research, inspiring communication, and knowledge transfer is very important? Do you have any advice on how really we can adapt? Is there a best practice that you would actually recommend that we adapt to really reduce this, make this much more equitable?
I think that's a really good question. We covered this in 2 of our papers, one of them looking at parachute science and what that means, especially for coral reef systems, and the other being how we went about co-production of the expedition with the Seychelles government. But I think one thing that is really important in the whole thing is that we create our projects, our programs, whatever endeavors that we want to do as partnerships and relationships. How would you form a relationship with a friend? And that's the approach that I think we often have to take when looking at working with different partners. How would we treat our partners means that, you get them involved from the onset and ensure that everyone has an equal voice at the table. I think that's one of the key aspects that we, especially myself, hone about with regards to equitable access. Now, one of the things that we have to realize is with regards to the deep sea, this is an area that hasn't been dominated by the Western Indian Ocean, for example, like I said, largely because of lack of resources. So how do we break into this space? How do we create more partnerships with mostly the Western world that do have these opportunities? And how do we ensure that the questions we are asking are relevant to the locations that need to be investigated? These are some of my key reflections, I think.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sheena. So we have a few more minutes. Let me actually go to the chat and see if you have any questions. Yes. I have something for Dr. Das, a bit technical. So what is this? So you mentioned about current, data for underwater search and rescue. So is there actually, what are the kinds of data sets that you generally use for this kind of applications?
Yeah, if you talk about specifically underwater search and recovery or search and rescue, I mean, rescue would be too much to say because, I mean, there will be no life beyond a certain point, but I would use the word recovery. So for underwater search and recovery, the underwater channel parameters are very, very important. So, I mean, when we have to plan any kind of search, I mean, right from the moment mishap has been reported, to the time we are able to mobilize our resources to actually commence the search, I think there will be a reasonable time lag, and I would put it even the best of effort, it will be at least a couple of days. I mean, if not more. So with that, the target or whatever we want to search has definitely moved on, and so we have to have a very, very scientific way to plan the search, and that will require the underwater conditions and also what kind of assets to mobilize. I mean, there will be modeling and simulation required at multiple aspects. I mean, firstly, what kind of assets to mobilize for the search to happen, and then how to plan the search. And as I said, our underwater sonar performance is significantly suboptimal in our region. So based on that, we have to have a realistic, typically what I've seen is people try to use what has been done in the West. I mean, particularly in the tropical, temperate or the polar region. So here, specific to our conditions, we'll have to see what kind of assets will have to be deployed first, and then secondly, how the search will have to be planned and how it will be carried out. So that is very, very important. I mean, I don't want to give examples here, but I think there's a lot of modeling and simulation required. And with data, I mean, Itopo database and a lot of databases are available today. And as we go forward, a lot more data will be required. I mean, the most important is just to give you a strategic example. In 2016-17, the Indian Ocean region, there was a lot of effort by the Chinese to map the undersea seabed, because the resolution is not good enough to deploy any underwater assets. So a lot of that kind of data will also be very, very important as a prerequisite to such effort. So, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of data to be collected, and it has to be, I mean, I would say it should be a regional effort rather than a national effort. And whosoever has resources, I think they need to come together. And as I had proposed, a pooling of resources and synergizing of effort, I mean, typically what happens is sometimes the security agencies get a little bit worried about, the data moving on to certain, whatever, they may call it a wrong hand, but I think scientific studies are equally important. So how do we balance all of it is something very, very important. And that's where the UDA framework that we have proposed would try to bring everybody on one platform.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Arnab. So let me, there's one question for Ken. Ken, there's a question from Nimit who says we are still struggling with carbon credits and offsets with regard to social justice. Is there any proposal under ocean governance? And if yes, then any plan on how to handle that?
Thank you, Chair. This is a relatively new area of ocean accounting that we're starting to look towards, both in terms of ecosystem blue ocean accounts, in terms of actual blue carbon assets and changes within the ocean space, mangroves, seagrasses, etc., kelp beds. But I spoke a little bit about some of those residuals from particular sectors that go back to the environment. And we're starting to look at how we would position carbon credits within this, both in terms of production and the production of carbon within particular production activities. But a really important component about this, which is quite much more difficult to capture in terms of a management aspect, is the aspects of consumption that is important here. It's very easy to regulate a particular sector in situ, if it's a fishery or if it's an oil and gas industry, etc., in terms of their carbon production. The carbon, for example, consumption by the man in the street requires a change of behavior, and that is a very much more difficult thing to put a handle on. But it is something that we're starting to look at. It's early days, but thank you for the question.
Thanks very much, Ken. So that brings us to the end of this session. I would not dare summarize the rich discussions that have happened here, but I have been taking down notes, and then my friends are helping me taking down notes here. So the idea is that we'll try to summarize, some of your excellent presentations from Dr. Nayak, who spoke about all the kinds of, different stakeholders, starting from fisheries to energy to resources, and then the governance aspects. And then, of course, Arnab spoke about the underwater domain awareness, Sheena about the Nekton mission and the future plans, and Ken on the ocean accounting frameworks and policy. So I've actually typed down 2 email IDs in the chat. If you're kind enough to actually try, if you are able to send us a few lines, actually, so that we are capturing the, essence. And then this thing is actually going to be presented on the last day. The moderator will make a presentation to the plenary session on the last day. I think we also addressed this, had good discussions around the 2 questions that were posed there. The how do we sustainably feed the world's population, and then how do we make these solutions more equitable and into sustainable, more sustainable. So thank you for all your presentations, for your time, for your contributions to this excellent session. I've actually been told that there were about 150 experts following this session, which is very good. And then I also thank all the organizers as well as the participants in this entire session. So we will actually we'll try to come up with some discussions maybe in the next 1 or 2 days. I'll try to get in touch with each of you. Anish will try to get in touch with each of you with a small summary, and then how we can really contribute through these initiatives on this blue economy and sustainable development. What should be our role when we actually move towards under the new framework of UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which is a great opportunity for all of us to really, get together and then do the things that we want to do to actually make the oceans more sustainable. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Anish, do you want to make any announcement for the next session?
Yeah, so I would like to thank all the keynote and the panelists to be taking their precious time and joining this session. Also thank Dr. Srinivas Kumar for moderating the session. So this is the end of the plenary session, and the next technical session will start at 14:30 hours IST or 900 hours UTC. There will be 2 parallel sessions going on, like session 1 in Hall A and session 12 in Hall B. And also, I also like to announce, don't miss the plenary session on 18th of March. That will be on contribution to UN Nations Decade of Ocean Sciences for Sustainable Development. That will be scheduled at 14:30 hours IST and 900 hour UTC. So thank you very much.
Do you want to quickly grab a picture before everybody logs off?
Yeah, sure.
Switch on your cameras and yeah.
There are
Thank you, everyone, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.